These are delicious. So crunchy, so mangoey. Okay, second attempt at making freeze-dried, vacuum-dried fruit at home. So a few things have changed. The pipe between the pump and the cold trap is now 10mm inside diameter rather than 6, I think. I've got a new fitting on the vacuum pump there, which has a bigger bore through it. The vacuum pump now has enough oil in it. Theoretically, they're shipped with enough oil to run, but when I drained it out, I got about 2 teaspoons. So I've got some good vacuum oil there, and it's supposed to have 370ml in it. There's no marking on the sight glass to see, like, to say the appropriate level of oil. It was a bit low, like it was sort of at this kind of level. But when I drained the oil out, that level didn't change because capillary action had trapped a bit of oil up against the glass. So there's actually nearly no oil in there. So this pump's been running on almost no oil for 25-30 hours, which is not great for its lifespan. On the upside, once I put this new oil in, it pulls a much better vacuum. So yeah, new oil, new fitting, new pipe, a bigger bore to connect to the cold trap. This connector here, it's got a bigger hole through it. Tried a new esky, a different esky for the dry ice, and this time I'm just going to try one piece of kiwi fruit and a few blueberries and see how that goes. So here's the cold trap with the metho in there. I've got a couple ice bricks in there getting it pre-chilled. Same metho from last week. I tried making a silicon seal with some silicon. It's over there somewhere. Because it's a little bit of a pain in the butt to get this seal lined up when you're trying to juggle several different things. But this gasket, I think it might be old. The silicon didn't set overnight, so I'm just going to use this gasket and put up with the fiddle. Okay, about to kick it off. Oh, and the vacuum pump runs much cooler now too. I'll still run the fan on it, but yeah. Okay, bye bye. Okay, loads of background noise. Sorry about that. But in here we've got some blueberries and a kiwi fruit, a slice of kiwi fruit. Both of those have been sitting in the esky with the dry ice. Cold trap is chock-a-block with dry ice and metho. Had to cut a bigger hole on the top to fit the new pipe fittings, but which is all good. And temperature is dropping. Vacuum pump buzzing away happily. So yeah. One thing I wanted to note is that the vacuum is actually quite a bit better than last time. Previously it was on like 0.98 and now it's on like past 0.99, which is great. I haven't put any salt in this ice yet, but I'll leave it run and see how we go. Okay, so it's, I don't know what time it is. Let's say 10:45. Okay, bye. Okay, it's now about an hour later. I wish I'd checked the time, but we've got no ice in the cold trap. Tell a lie, there's a slight layer of frost on the bottom. Okay, one of the blueberries has burst open in the food chamber. So don't know what that means. I might put it on the heat now and start gently warming the food. Okay, bye. Alright, minor heart stop moment there. So I've just switched over to the hot plate after being in the cold bath for about 2 hours. It's currently set to 40 degrees, it hasn't got up to temperature yet. But I turned this on, and then some undefined period of time later, like within a few minutes I think, I noticed that the vacuum pump wasn't running, and realised that it had tripped the circuit breaker. Pulling too much current with the vacuum pump, the fan, the hot plate, the washing machine and the dryer and the dishwasher all on at the same time on the same circuit. So I turned off the dryer for now. Yeah, and then started the vacuum pump in time before it could siphon all of its oil into the cold trap. There is a little bit of oil in the cold trap, but not too much. When I put this new fitting on top of the vacuum pump, I left out the oil backflow valve because there was no straightforward way of attaching it to the bottom of the new fitting. So I do have to make sure that there is never a situation in which there is negative pressure back through the vacuum pump, because it will leak enough air in the vacuum pump to force the oil back up out and into the cold trap. Righto, but you know, didn't lose pressure. And hopefully now we'll start to drive off the solid water. Okay, bye. Okay, it's 13:20 and it's been about half an hour since I put the food chamber in the water bath, and the water bath is now set to 50 degrees. Can't handle that. And I see a little bit of foam has burst out of the blueberries. I don't know if this one here is visible on the camera, but it's got sort of a crusty appearance, which bodes well. No visible change as yet to the kiwi fruit, but well, we'll see how we go. No other change to the system. The cold bath is still down around -70. Might be time for a new block of dry ice at some point. But you can still see it's boiling away in there. I think that the rate of boiling might have picked up, which might indicate that there's some heat happening. It might be interesting to somehow like quantify the amount of boiling that's coming off. That would be a good proxy for how much moisture is being condensed out. I don't know how I'd do that without making it like a sealed container and then measuring a flow rate or something, or if I were logging this temperature more precisely, I could maybe watch for dips in the temperature. Anyway, so there we go. Okay, it's been 6 hours now since it went under vacuum, and about 5.5 hours or so since I put it in the heat. So you see the kiwi fruit has cracked along the middle, which shows that there's some sort of dimensional changes happening there, so that bodes well. It's drying out. Most of the blueberries have sort of burst and spewed their guts out. Some of them are sort of holding their plump shape. Some of them are sort of starting to shrivel a little bit. There's a fine spattering of moisture on little droplets on the bottom of the pot, which makes me think that something in there is boiling and sort of spattering stuff out, which shouldn't be happening. It should just be going straight from solid to a gas. So something is not perfect in there. It's at 55 degrees now, so maybe I should be running it at 45, because yeah, I don't want it to boil. I want it to go straight to a gas. I have had a bit of a peek inside the cold trap. Well, I'm still zoomed in. And there is some ice forming in there. It's a bit of a pain in the butt to take it all out and film it and everything. So I won't do that now. I'll do that at the end when there's a cool big ball of ice in there. But it's holding temperature all right. And -71, that's good. And I've built this sort of little hut out of insulation foam to try to reduce the airflow over the esky, to try to trap some of the coolth in there. So right now, I think I will turn off the pump, vent the atmosphere in there, and have a poke at that kiwi fruit, see how sort of dry it is and how heavy it is, and I might eat one of the blueberries. Okay, I'm going to set up for that now. Okay, here we go. So, pokey poke. Ooh, it is still wet, but there is a sort of crustiness to it. It's still really cold, which is interesting given that the pot it's sitting in is at 55 degrees, so it's interesting. I wonder how the bottom is like. It's pretty firmly attached there. So the bottom, oh, it's drier. Okay, so that's interesting. So if you have a look in cross section here, there we go. So this is the part that was on the bottom, this is the part that's on the top. The stuff that's on the top is still cold, and you can see there's some wetness to it, but the underside, where the heat has been applied, is all dry and crispy. Okay, so we're getting good conduction, so we do need something to radiate the heat into that. I'm going to pull out a bloob. Oh, the blueberries are very crunchy and crusty. Still, no moisture in them at all. Nom nom nom. Oh, delicious. Sorry about that. So there is some moisture in them, but almost all of it is gone. So as I'm handling it, the heat, I'm going to turn off this light. As I'm handling it, the heat of my fingers is sort of melting the residual moisture. But yeah, delicious. So this one's still got some juiciness to it. So it seems to be highly dependent, so it's still cold inside. Highly dependent on the amount of heat that can get put into it to drive off the solid ice. Okay, that's interesting. Alright, I'm going to chuck this back in before it all gets too funky. I did quickly want to have a look inside the cold trap on camera, I decided. So I'm going to extract that out now. Okay, so there is a good amount of frost forming in there on the walls, and there is a little pile forming on the bottom, but I suspect that pile might be the frozen vacuum fluid. Maybe? Oops, the gasket just fell in the tank. Okay. So I ran a quick test on the viability of using a floodlight here to put some infrared radiation into the chamber. And I don't really want to have to do that with 240 because getting it into the chamber is going to be dangerous and fiddly. But I thought I might be able to do it with DC. However, at the maximum power output of my benchtop supply here, the tungsten filament in this floodlight is just barely glowing, which ain't going to cut the mustard. Plugged into 240, this pumps out loads of IR, but yeah, I could set this up above the pot facing down into it, like right up against the lid, but I don't know how much, if any, of that infrared radiation is going to penetrate through like the 15mm thick plastic, transparent plastic on the top. So it really needs to be inside. I do have some nichrome wire floating around here somewhere. I could set that up, like wind a little heating element out of that, and then run that off DC. But this is a non-starter. Okay, bye. All right. So I rustled up some nichrome wire I had left over from the bad old days of making your own 3D printer hot end out of Kapton tape and nichrome wire and bits of PTFE. And it's putting out a decent amount of IR. Like I can feel that radiating on the back of my fingers. I just made this by winding some around a screwdriver. And it's pulling like 50 watts there. And putting out a reasonable amount of IR. So I could crank it up even higher once this is in a vacuum, because at the present I don't want to get this too hot, because if it does, it'll just burn and snap. But once it's under a vacuum, I should be able to crank it up. The main problem with this approach is that it's just yet another thing to fiddle with when getting the thing set up. So right now I need to make sure that the vacuum is holding the lid on the cold trap and also holding the lid on the food trap. So this is just another thing I have to make sure is lined up and isn't shorting on the side and blah blah blah. But I think it might be a worthwhile thing to investigate for the next batch that I put in. Because yeah, this is putting out quite a lot of heat. There's a lot more heat coming off the top of it, just convection, but underneath, yeah, I can feel that. So ideally this would be right down just above the food to help the water ice boil off, like sublimate off into the vacuum. Because right now, when the water ice leaves the material, it steals the energy out of it, steals the energy out of the kiwi fruit, and that means the kiwi fruit goes cold, and then there's not enough energy left for more water to leave. So you need to be able to keep pumping heat into it to keep driving that moisture off, which is what this might be able to do. So I'll have a think, see if I can work out a robust way of doing this. Okay, bye-bye. Righto, it's 8 PM. I've just chucked in some mango. So there's slices are about, those little ones over on the right there are sort of wedge-shaped slices that are probably 10 mil at their thickest point, and that big slice over there is 10 mil the whole way through. I've left the kiwi fruit in there. It is continuing to dry. There's almost no moisture left in it now. I picked it up and it was extremely light. Still a little bit pliant, like it wasn't crunchy like I was expecting. Like I've had vacuum dried strawberries before, and they had a really crunchy, chalky texture. But that's not doing that for some reason. Might have something to do with the sort of structure or whatever proteins make up its sort of non-water structure. I just chucked in another brick of dry ice because the temperature was getting up a bit. I don't think that probe is in the fluid. I'll have to fix that. Yeah, I need some better insulation under here. I don't think this Eskia is particularly good. I don't think it's a particularly good insulator because yeah, there's loads of condensation coming off and it's enough to freeze ice, which is wasting a bunch of coolant. So I've left the hot plate off for now. You're supposed to put the things in cold for the first time and then add the heat after a bit, but I'm going to try gradually ramping the heat up straight from the get-go, see how that turns out. Okay, bye-bye. Substantial malfunction. So I noticed an absence of vacuum pump sounds for the second time tonight. The first time I came out and turned it off and turned it back on again, it started back up, and I was like, that doesn't bode well. And then yes, how about that? It just started up by itself. So it seems like it's got maybe a thermal cutout or something, but when I came out I could see vacuum oil going glunk, 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 pumping itself into the cold trap. And that cold trap is boiling pretty vigorously when it shouldn't be, so a bunch of hot vacuum oil has pumped itself into the cold trap. And so now that oil is all contaminated with water and it's boiling away my dry ice. And there's no oil left in that. Not enough oil left in that vacuum pump. So yeah, let me just get a glove on here. I'm guessing my cold trap is going to be substantially polluted. Yep, there's all the vacuum oil. Oh. So I don't trust the pump enough to let it run overnight, because if it cycles off and all the oil pumps itself into the cold trap and then cycles back on again, it's going to run with no oil. So I pulled out all the fruit, so we can have a look at where we got. So the mango is still all gooey. No, there's sort of a slight surface crustiness to it. On the bottom, however, it appears to have dried out where it was touching the hot metal, or the warm metal. So yeah, it looks like that's the key. Very dependent on being able to get the heat into it to start the process, which makes thermodynamic sense. So you see where it was touching the metal, it has dried out nicely. So the kiwi fruit has been in here for quite a lot longer, and it is light as a feather. So it has almost fully dried out now. Might still be a bit goopy in the middle. Unfortunately, I've brushed my teeth, so I can't taste it. But yeah, kiwi fruit just dried out pretty well. I'm happy with that. But yeah, just based on its density, I can assume that most of the moisture is gone. There's still sort of a bit of a colour gradient across it, which might mean that there's some moisture in the centre still. The blueberries are completely hollow. They feel like they're just the skin, which is good. So that they have dried out fully all the way through, which is cool. But yeah, anything with like the mango, really need to get that heat into it. Alright, I'm gonna let the cold trap thaw overnight and see if I can't separate out the vacuum oil, because the vacuum oil's not cheap. So I'll see if I can filter the vacuum oil out of the water, pop it back in. I don't know if that's going to work. And I'd also like to get to the bottom of why the vacuum pump, probably based on the behaviour, I suspect it's overheating and a thermal cutout's kicking in. Because yeah, you heard it start up again. It wasn't like just grinding through friction. It was like it was, okay, I'm cool enough, let's turn back on now. Okie dokie. Progress. Slow progress. Okay, bye. Okay, it's 14:20 on day 2. Completely rebuilt the vacuum pump. Haven't really got enough dry ice left to do anything else other than what I've currently got loaded, which is some mango, lots of mango, and some kiwi fruit. So, yep, still chilling down. I ended up putting that old fitting back on the pump because okay, it's 1600 hours and the compressor started making this awful sound again. Makes me think there's something wrong with the motor, because the motor is getting untouchably hot, like like 70 degrees I think when I put the thermocouple on it. The vacuum chamber, or the pump side, is not getting that cold. It's kind of hard to tell where the sound is coming from, but it sounds wicked unpleasant. So chuck some light on the fruit. It's definitely in there. It's just sitting in salted ice water at the present. So I reckon it might be time to start the heating phase. So here we go. Righto, it's 23:30 on Sunday. I've used up all the dry ice. I've just put the last piece in. That's the mango and the kiwi fruit from the last batch I'm going to do. The mango has definitely dried out. It has sort of just desiccated as opposed to freeze drying or vacuum drying. A bit disappointing, but whatever. This project has had a lot of those. So I cranked the water bath up to 60 degrees Celsius. It might have something to do with it. That might be too hot. The cold trap is holding steady at -70 or so. You can just see, if you snake the light in there and fiddle a lot and rub it with your finger to clear the frost, you can see loads of ice forming in the cold trap, which is great. The pump hasn't conked out. It's been running for about 12 hours straight now. About that. 14 hours straight. A long time. It's champion. Interestingly, you can hear that rattly sound, and it's hard to tell where it's coming from exactly. I think it's coming from the actual vacuum pump side of things. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like the vanes sort of banging around in their slots, or like as they're sweeping around, if they're going like donka 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 donk, bouncing off the edge. But listen what happens if I vent a bit of air into the chamber. Stops rattling and goes back to sounding happy. And then if I give this is the type of vacuum gauge you got to whack to make it change. Once it gets back down to where it was at, the value it was at previously, the vacuum, it starts rattling again. So I don't know what to take from that. The motor is still unreasonably hot for a motor, but it hasn't burned itself up, so I don't know. Good on you, pump. Go back. Alright, it's 8:30 the next morning. Stuff in there looks all sort of shriveled. The kiwi fruit looks like it's still got some moisture to it. The cold bath is up to 16 degrees. I'm going to take the cold trap out and get a photo of it, because it always looks cool. So here's the cold trap. It was sort of sitting in the bath at an angle, which explains why there's that sort of profile to the snow line. But it does look pretty sweet. It's mostly fluffy. It's sort of got a hard crystal to it, as opposed to being like fluffy snowflakes. And the throat there is nearly entirely frozen up, but this was sort of light permeable snow, so it was still able to flow, but it would have frozen up after much longer, I suspect. Let's check on the fruit. Get off of there. Oh, it's crispy. It's crispy. Hey. How about this one? Oh, it's crispy too. Oh, that makes me happy. Very light and fluffy like a chip. How's the kiwi fruit? Oh, it's also crispy. Hey, success at long last. Ah, yeah, there's. You hear that? It's like scratching chalk. That is pretty damn sweet. So these slices are a bit thicker than this one I put them in, but not hugely. I'm gonna go chuck these in an airtight bag so that I start absorbing moisture from the air, and we'll do a taste test later. It was all worth it. These are delicious. So crunchy. So mango-y. The kiwi fruit is terrible. It's like just vile. texture is completely wrong. But mango, amazing. I'm definitely going to make some more of this. So it's got a bit of a different texture on the top versus the bottom. Honestly, I don't remember which is which. But it looks as though the stuff that was on the bottom, focus, is a bit sort of lighter and crispier, whereas the stuff on the top sort of went flat a little bit, but it's really nice. Okay, bye-bye.